So we'll just give everyone a few minutes to log in, to join, so on. Um, and then we'll start our conversation on leadership lessons from the field of athletics. Cool. We have, I'm very excited to see some of these names popping up. Um, oh, hey, Boker, hey, Dave. Excellent. All right, we'll just give another minute, and then we'll start. All right. Okay. All right. Let's begin. So we have to make the most of our hour. Okay. So you win a few, you lose a few. Some get rained out, but you got to dress for all of them. Hall of Fame baseball player Satchel Paige's personal philosophy applies all the more to leaders in athletics. Welcome, everyone, to Leadership Lessons from the Field of Athletics. This panel conversation is part of a curated leadership sequence of professional development events from UChicago alumni in its signature series of Career Month. My name is Josh Levitt. I'm a 2010 alumnus of the college and a staff member at UChicago Alumni. I help provide opportunities for professional development, lifelong learning, and community connection among fellow Maroons. Today, we will hear from 4 alumni from various academic programs within the university who have all found their niche or several in the field of athletics. Samira Shah is Senior Vice President, Legal, General Counsel, and Assistant Secretary at New York Roadrunners. Samira joined the Roadrunners after serving as the General Counsel and Corporate Secretary for WWE, with her expertise in corporate governance, business organization, intellectual property, privacy, compliance, regulatory issues, contracts, employment, and litigation, you name it, she's done it. At UChicago, she crossed the finish line in the college's Near Eastern Languages and Civilizations program, then received a master's in Middle Eastern Studies from our Division of the Humanities. Samira then studied in Syria as a Fulbright scholar and earned a law degree from some school called Columbia. Sean Ahmed academically trained at the college as an econ major and went on to gain extensive professional experience in everything from full Bayesian modeling to Shiny app development, biomechanical data, high-speed video analysis, the amateur draft, and player development in Major League Baseball. After 6 years in baseball operations with the Chicago Cubs and a World Series championship, yes, that was, Sean was responsible really for that. Sean joined the Pittsburgh Pirates organization as Director of Research and Development. Arjun Chowdri majored in Law, Letters, and Society at UChicago and has since become a seasoned executive and recent 40 Under 40 Sports Business Journal Award winner for his role as the PGA of America's first Chief Administrative and Innovation Officer. Not only does he enjoy building challenger brands, optimizing underleveraged assets, and creating cultural connections, but when he is not on the green for work, he also serves as a board member for USA Table Tennis and on the board of 21st Century Leaders, a nonprofit organization that connects, transforms, and inspires high school students across Georgia to become leaders in their schools, communities, and ultimately their careers. Then Sara Toussaint, wonderful to see you again. She's a leader not only in the world of athletics, but also in our world of Maroons. Sports Business Journal named Sara to the 2018 class of Game Changers, and in 2021, she was named a co-owner of the North Carolina Courage in the National Women's Soccer League. Sara earned her BA in public policy from the University of Chicago, as well as an MBA from NYU, and currently serves as president of the UChicago Alumni Board. On the professional field, Sara is a partner at Underdog Venture Team, a new social impact enterprise that offers strategic marketing services, as well as invests in underrepresented founders in sports, entertainment, and wellness. She's also a board member of the Marketing Jersey, a Hispanic-owned boutique sports consultancy and athlete management agency that represents global soccer talent. Please put your go-to sports emoji in the chat to thank our panelists for joining us today. As we start discussing their career paths and their professional insights, please feel free to type your questions and comments right there in the chat, and we'll try to cover as many as possible. So thank you. Welcome to this conversation. So let's kind of begin at the beginning. How would you say the University of Chicago figured in your career journey, personally and or professionally? Sara, let's start with you.
Yeah, thanks, Josh. Good to see everybody. Everybody, thanks for joining. I would say my very first job on campus was actually in the athletics department, working for the baseball coach and the basketball coach for the men's teams. And my job consisted of looking at scouting reports. And I distinctly remember the coach at the time, Coach Baldea, said anybody with under I think it was like maybe a 1200 or 1300 SAT, he's like, toss them, right? So that was my first job in athletics, not realizing there was actually a career path in that space. So it was just totally random that happened, but that's kind of where I got my first taste of professional, well, not professional, but a career in sports. I was at the University of Chicago.
Wonderful, awesome. Arjun.
Yeah, no problem. So I think personally, I think Chicago was wonderful to me because I think even if I think about it now, probably half my groomsmen were a University of Chicago alum, right? But from a professional side, I would say the University of Chicago has this beautiful way of teaching one how to learn, right? And one how to analyze. And although, with that being said, I didn't, and Sean and I talked about this in our prep call, is that it didn't necessarily teach me how to apply that thought, right? So I actually moved on and went immediately to graduate school and did it in an MBA in marketing and sports business. But I think the foundational ability that Chicago taught me in that way of analytical thinking and how to always be a learner has really been the thing that's allowed me to accelerate in my career.
That's, yeah, very, very well put. Absolutely. Thank you so much. Sean.
Thanks again. I'm so excited for this. Love you, Chicago. Love athletics, and couldn't be more excited to be part of this panel. For me, as Joshua mentioned, I studied economics with a minor in Latin American studies. And when I went to the University of Chicago, I knew I wanted to get in baseball. And I called that my baseball major at a time when Moneyball, which many people might be like familiar with the book or the movie, that was happening basically while I was at UChicago. So I really had no idea what I was going to do in baseball, whether it was going to be technical or it was just going to be writing and development and things like that. So like a lot of things, UChicago gave me a really broad base educationally in terms of thinking about problems in different ways. And from a pretty like targeted athletic standpoint, the same coaches that Sara mentioned, I interacted with as well. The baseball coach gave me an opportunity to be in the dugout with the team, keeping the book and just kind of volunteer any way I could. It was totally a make your own sort of position. Worked on the Chicago Maroons as a sports editor. My senior year started along with a few other students, broadcasting and just worked on all these different projects. It taught me how to interact with students, coaches, athletes, think about the game in a variety of ways. And that is something that I think has been invaluable to me in the future, along with everything else that people might think of generally with the University of Chicago.
Yeah, that dovetails so nicely with what Arjun is saying about that lifelong learning, for sure. Yeah, thank you. Samira, tell us.
So picking up on the theme of lifelong learning, I think that Chicago did a phenomenal job of teaching me how to learn in any area. And it allowed me to work in a variety of different fields throughout my career. And in kind of private practice, the first case that I worked on was literally about rocket science. Not a science major, but I learned it. I learned how to do it, and then went on from there. And then on the athletic side, so I've been a lifelong runner. And I came to, when I came to Chicago, I actually started on the tennis team, and then I switched over to the track team. I didn't last that long. I was just there for a year on the running team before getting too many injuries to continue. But it really helped me kind of learn like what it's like to be in sports at that level. And then it kind of allowed me to have that that kind of in the back of my mind, as this is something that is a personal interest of mine. I continued running afterwards, but then later became a professional interest. So started there.
Wonderful. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. Well, I guess to take us back to the core, Syrian Roman philosopher Publius Syrus famously wrote that anyone can hold the helm when the sea is calm. And all right, I see your face. Okay, he more famously wrote "Ignorance is bliss," but the holding the helm when the sea is calm is another one of his. But while anyone can hold the helm when the sea is calm, can you tell us about a particular leadership challenge you've encountered and the lessons you learned from or demonstrated for your team? I know that's something that we talked about in our prep call also, is just the nature of the nature of challenges, crises, and so on. So Arjun, yeah, lead us off there. I really appreciate your.
Oh, I got the easy start. Good.
Yeah.
No, I appreciate it. It's with any kind of public facing enterprise, you're often faced with crises. So myself and the colleagues here, and I'm sure some of you on the phone, or many of you on the phone, have noticed that the world of sport tends to be this kind of ongoing world of crisis management a bit. But I'll talk about one I'm super proud of, right? Is how our organization led through COVID, right? And how as a team we came together. And I think what happened was, I think it was March 5th, we were in board meetings, and then we had an executive team meeting the day after. We're like, this thing's really happening. I think it's coming. And I was sitting there, I was like, I've already bought masks. I've had masks for a month because of our partners in China. I've been worried about it. And they're like, why didn't you tell us to buy masks? It's like, I don't know. But so we're like, what do we do? And we said, well, let's just close the office, like as a point one, right? Like just standard kind of hurricane procedure. Let's just shut it down. There's no value in forcing people to come in tomorrow. And that's before kind of events started closing. Then we did a simple thing is what it seems simple, is that we just set up a 4-hour call every morning for the executive team. And what we would do is we would use our strategic plan as our guide, right? And it's based on kind of 4 key stakeholders: people, member, business, and the game is how kind of we think about that. And we would go through each area and go, how are we going to help people to the other side of this? I have the fortune of working for a seasoned veteran who's Seth Waugh, the former CEO of Deutsche Bank. And fortunately for us at that moment, and unfortunately for him, this is kind of the 3rd giant existential crisis he's brought companies through. And what he said, and he told us, he said, a lot of people look to the government, but it's private companies, perhaps more so than the government's responsibility to help people through these crises at these moments. So let's figure out how we do that. And one of the first things he was like, well, the little we know about the disease is it kind of transmits less outdoors and distance. Maybe we can help. And I kind of fired back as the child of an infectious disease doctor going, no, shut it all down, right? Like shut it all down. Like, so we went back and forth as a team, and we all agreed at the end of it, none of us knew anything, right? And so, which was good. So we needed like people who were experts. And this goes to the point of like learning from others is important. So I knew one of our board members knew Dr. Fauci. And so we got to Dr. Fauci, who got us to the CDC. And then we have obviously one of my colleagues is this one of the most seasoned golf operators there are, John Easterbrook. He started this company, Troon. And we basically put them, the CDC experts and John in a room and said, how can golf open up responsibly? And the CDC liked it because they were like, people need this. People need an outlet. And you're coming in and trying to figure out how to do it responsibly. So we created this entire program called kind of Back to Golf that had how you could open up golf based on the communicability of the disease in that market. And then we pushed it all out, and the local golf professional could advocate with their local health department to open up golf. And that's how golf started opening up, right? And then when golf started opening up, all of a sudden people started feeling comfortable, and then that kind of spread. And that's why golf is up as it is, because all of a sudden people fell back in love with it, that forgot about it. It's like when Coke launched Coke 2, people didn't like Coke 2, but they fell back in love with Coke, the original. They remembered that kind of nostalgia about it, right? So that was huge. Other things, from a people perspective, people lost their roles. I partnered with a Carolina-based company to create a relief fund, a COVID relief fund. And so we worked on cutting expenses and taking that money and putting it towards that. The whole executive team reduced our own compensation to do so as well. And we put it into this kind of COVID relief fund, and we were able to deploy $8 million to people in the golf industry through local grants, right? Even, we're a federated organization. How do we make that part happen? How do we make our championships occur, right? And we were able to do the first year a fanless championship, but it worked, right? And we were able to recover the broadcast revenue. So again, I think the key thing is like a strategic plan should work for you in these unsettled times. And we were able to use that and go through that, and kind of coming out of it, the industry is healthier than ever.
That's, yeah, I mean, right, as you suggest, there's a way to plan for the unplannable and be nimble and versatile when no matter what happens.
And be human, right? Above all, right? Like, I think that's the thing we all learned through these last couple of years is like, we have to rely on each other. We have to rely on the goodness of each other. And if we focus there first, we'll continue to strive and move forward.
Right, and remember, or kind of like remember why people turn to the game. That ultimately it's because they enjoy the game.
And just being with each other, right? Like, we lost being with each other, right? And golf as well as running, Samira, as you know, like, were ways people could be with each other again and not feel awkward or different.
Right. Yeah, Samira, what do you think? What is what is the particular leadership challenge that you've encountered and the lessons that you learned from or demonstrated for your team, your colleagues?
Sure. So part of the nature of being a general counsel is that you deal with lots of challenges. Most of them are confidential, so I can't get into those, but I could get into are public. And so I'm actually going to follow on Arjun's lead there and also talk about the pandemic. And at the beginning of the pandemic, I was actually at a fashion company rather than sports. But we had some of those similar issues, right? There are no more events. And so for the fashion company that did high-end fashion, people weren't really buying like ball gowns anymore because there are no balls to go to. But we could switch to cashmere sweats, which sold really well. So it was trying to figure out both kind of how to continue with our kind of mission during the pandemic, and use kind of fashion in a way to help people kind of still be part of like a storytelling during the day, and to embrace kind of Zoom fashion from the waist up, but also to make a lot of really hard decisions, right? Because when your business shrinks by a considerable margin, and you're not sure how long that's going to last, right? You can't have the same expenses that you had when things were going well. And so you have to make a lot of difficult decisions around people, and having having spent most of my career as in a law firm where I was advising clients rather than being a client, is very different, right? To kind of advise people like, okay, you need to reduce your head count by so many people versus, okay, now you're inside and here's the list, you pick, right? Who are you going to reduce? Why? And how's that going to affect your business? And what are you going to do for them? Right. And so those are really tough decisions. And I think we probably all had to make during the pandemic. And that's part of being a leader, right? Because you're looking beyond tomorrow, and you're looking at what's in the best interests, right, of all the stakeholders, and how do we get this, past this current crisis to be able to go on and live another day. And I think probably a lot of the world had to do that in the last crisis, regardless of the industry, but in particular with, things like sports where you have live events, and you really rely on having a crowd of people, right? You just couldn't do that anymore. So I think there was a lot of leaders were called on to kind of innovate during that time, and I think we've seen innovation that we wouldn't have really seen. At least we've seen a more rapid adoption of it, right? So things like virtual races, right? Those were around before, but not that many people participated. But over the pandemic, if that's the only way you can participate, you're going to do it.
Yeah, we had at UChicago, we had a virtual 5K.
Right.
You got to do, but in that way, as you said, of course, sounds paradoxical at the same time, because it took geography a little bit out of the equation. More people could participate, from other regions than than
Right.
the others might have. Yeah, I really appreciate that, Samira. Sean, I saw you had your hand up. You wanted to dive in?
No, I literally
you-
just was resizing the window. Track on my raised hand, please.
Yeah, we're still working on our Zoom choreography and our nimbleness with windows and tabs.
One of these pandemics, I'll get it. Yeah. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
exactly. Maybe the next one. You'll get there. I mean, I'm always still learning myself. Sara, you want to weigh in? I know on this question that we were talking about this week.
Oh, talk about weight. It was a weight on my shoulders this past year. But I want to go back to the 5K, because actually I ran it and I've got my medal. And it's very nice, and they should have another one this year. Anyway, yeah. So for anybody who's familiar with the women's soccer space here in the US, last season, it feels like it's still ongoing, but it's just been nonstop challenges. Quite frankly, there's not one team in the league that did not face some type of issue, usually around behavioral concerns. And so I would say, one of the things like I kind of took away from that, just, seeing how every team responded and the leaders within that team, how they responded. I think the big piece of when you're facing a challenge like behavioral issues, right, where it's abuse in any way, shape, or form. I think the big piece is trying to kind of maybe not own it, even if it's not your responsibility or not your fault, or you were totally in the dark. I think to own and confront what the issue is really important. What I saw a lot last year were people kind of bunkering down and trying to hope that a situation would go away by not talking about it. I am of the mindset that's important to face it head on and be honest. And in fact, when scandal hit our team, my first instinct was to go and Shah knows me, to go to Twitter, because that's where I voice, that's where I talk about the things I care about. And so I had a general counsel friend for an NFL team who knew me also very well, texted me first thing in the morning and said, Sara, do not tweet. Do not say anything about what's going on. And I was like, Steve, I can't stay quiet about what's happening. And so I just sat for an hour and I thought about what I wanted to say. And I said it. And I think, quite frankly, that really helped my personal, my personal experience in my club the fans saw that I cared enough to talk about it when everybody else was like, we shouldn't say anything. So I think kind of facing up to that is really important. And then to that, I think the second step in leading, and, following, any type of negative situation is showing people you care. And I felt like that was, tweeting about it was the way to show people I really cared. And I was really upset about, what had been taking place. And then I think that the most important thing is like show how you're gonna do better, right? So I can say whatever I want on Twitter, but then what comes next, right? And what comes next for all the other clubs that have to face these issues is you got to find ways to do better and then act on them. And then and it's not, whereas some of the thinking around COVID was very, it was in the media, but also very long term. Some of the stuff is like, what are you gonna do right now? And then show 2 months from now, the following season, and then on that, this is not something that's, gonna fall off the radar. I think about all the conversations around diversity, inclusion, around George Floyd, and all these initiatives that the sports industry was gonna do 2 years later, like a lot of that's fallen by the wayside. So how do we continue to show up for our fans, and how do we stay true to what we said we're gonna do? And so I think those are maybe my 3 takeaways are kind of like face it, own it, whatever the problem is, show people that you care, and then prove that by taking action on how you're gonna do better. So that's kind of what I've got in terms of this question. We've been living it the past season.
Right.
But lots of growth, lots of learning.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Look, there's a time to hold back and a time to tweet out, and there's and like I said, there's a time to express and a time to also like show up and take action. So absolutely appreciate that. Thank you. Sean, tell us.
Yeah, this question, it's such a good question, and one I imagine that there's broad themes that are so universal that that you really apply all the time. And also, this is such a big topic that every year you might have a different answer. And the one on my mind right now, specifically this year, coming off a couple really inspiring conferences and keynotes that I was at, one of them being the Women in Sports Data Symposium that was held in Brooklyn for the first time this year, was around this idea that sports teams, and probably a lot of industries, but sports teams often have like desired and write these job descriptions looking for the unicorn, the person who can do what are essentially 3 jobs in one. And most sports teams are pretty small, like for their scope and their scale and their publicity. They've tended to have pretty small front offices and groups working on them. And baseball has often been that, but it's also, baseball itself has been growing a lot, and the challenges are growing a lot in a competitive industry where it's not about just you trying to be a little bit better than the year before. It's you're trying to exceed what 29 other teams in Major League Baseball are doing. So the technologies, the scale, the scope, the bar just keeps raising. And that also means that the size of front offices increase and the challenges increase. So it's impossible to find an entire front office of unicorns. It's even just an unreasonable, aspiration in the first place, whatever a unicorn actually is, which ties to kind of the leadership lesson, which is that I think everyone desires to be as valuable as possible. Everyone wants to impact as many areas as possible. If you graduate from the University of Chicago, you probably can impact a ton of different areas. But something you also learn from athletics, if you ever play a team sport or anything like that, is that it's about the team and the role you play on the team, and that we're collectively trying to accomplish something. So how you, for me, people managing, trying to inspire a group, trying to get the collective working as productively as possible. I've really put a lot of mindset and tried to message to the group how much we rely on each other, to use the term that was brought up just a few minutes ago. much we rely on each other and how much our team success is dependent on hiring a bunch of different experts who are really great at something and can collaborate in really productive ways, and that we have to really embrace that. So that's something that I think is a lesson. If this were a talk about leadership lessons from athletics applied to any area, that might still actually be something I would share in some way, that you learn from sports, you learn from team environments. But also it's really very important right now, I think, in the sports world as well, as we keep growing as an industry.
Yeah, that's a really thought-provoking answer. And I think what ties, a lot of these stories together, there's, much more commonality than difference, that, you're all, like, the four of you are all, like, so focused on operational excellence and on, like, also, like, taking all the positive opportunities there are, because there's so much potential, like, I think, now for, like, ways of improving, like, internally as an organization, and and like the, like, larger role that it plays, even as there are also like opportunities for, unfortunately, like, how many opportunities for abuse and so on, like that. And so it sounds like all of you are really, threading that line. And whereas, anybody can, hold the helm when the sea is calm, when it isn't, as it often isn't in sports, like, you'll have, I think, at least like a value system that, leads you on, like, how to steer through those. And it makes me, think that we should turn to a question actually that was submitted in advance from our audience, that I think dovetails well with these stories you've shared. So how do you show compassion and empathy as a leader without appearing necessarily weak? So Samira, I know that came up in our conversation earlier.
So I guess I would kind of challenge the premise of the question a bit, because I think that showing compassion and empathy shows leadership, right? And that for me, like, the type of leader I want to be is kind of a servant leader, right? Somebody who is serving the people who are working kind of with me, and who, like, are reporting to me, creating an environment where they can really do their best, and bring their ideas to the table and feel comfortable doing that. And so creating kind of an open collaborative environment. And that, I think, requires, some degree of vulnerability, right? People need to know that, you're human, right? And that, they can come to you with their issues, and that, you can see on kind of your team when somebody is having a hard time. And I've always felt like it's something that, it's better to try to talk through than try to ignore and just, like, push people past a point where they're comfortable. So, I mean, and I think for each person, it's going to be a little bit different on how that works. Some people are going to be more comfortable talking to you about their issues than others. Some may want to keep it strictly business. And I think as leaders, you kind of work with your team and try to find, what works best for each person. And so I think you have to be some empathetic a bit to be able to get to that point.
Yeah, I see. What I liked also about this whole thing is, it was a question asked before the event even started, and I brought it up. As Samira says, well, let me ask a question about that question, and that will in turn clarify it. And I think you're exactly on the mark there, Samira. Thank you. Yeah, Sean, what do you think?
Samira mentions the term servant leadership that I hadn't heard before the last couple of years. And I think our understanding of what makes for good leadership is evolving, and it's evolving pretty fast because of cultural reasons, because it's just the forefront of the discussion, and lots of other reasons. Probably also the diversification of people who are in leadership roles. But I think that what I've, one lesson that I think is really important in sports, for example, is that it's almost impossible to be right all the time. I don't know if you can be in any industry, but when you start venturing into areas where there's a lot of luck and randomness involved, and you're trying to evaluate players, no one really knows what's going to happen. No one can really forecast the future, let alone how humans are going to develop into the future. And something that is a subtle aspect that not everyone masters in leadership positions or otherwise with sports teams is the ability to admit uncertainty or when they've been wrong in the past, and ultimately to learn fast. That's the important thing. But I think that's just an important thing to communicate, is when you've made mistakes in the past, what you've learned from it, if anything, and to help others feel comfortable in doing that, and not making them feel that they have to pretend to be overconfident in order to be believed. So that's probably a little bit where I'd go. I would hope, and part of the reason I end up with the Pirates, actually a huge part of the reason I end up with the Pirates, is because their general manager, Ben Cherington, and it was because of a personal interaction with him in 2019, and also references from people who had worked with him in Boston while I was working with the Cubs, who he's just a truly empathetic leader. And I don't think that's something that can be learned, to be sure. It's also something you hope that teams and leadership roles are selecting for that. And that's certainly something I valued in terms of following him to Pittsburgh and trying to tackle the job we are.
Absolutely. Well put. Sarah, what do you think? Compassion and empathy without appearing weak? The
Oh
premise?
yeah, I mean that's my jam, I hope. And it's interesting that Sean said, he feels empathy can be learned. I need to hear that, I think, because I don't think, at least in the sports industry, there's a lot of egos and a lot of people who speak with certainty too often. But I don't know, I've never seen as compassion and empathy as being weak. The same day that I was tweeting, that morning I was probably crying all day, and I dare somebody to call me weak that day, because that was like, it was just a way to show that I was really hurting with the fans and with the players, but also it was that emotion that is pushing me to take action on how to improve. So I think if you've got the compassion, the empathy, I'd like to think there's usually some type of action taking place alongside of it. So that's how I'd answer that one. And
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. Absolutely. Who do we say? Oh, Arjun, yeah.
Yeah. So to Sara and Sean's point, I do think, I'm not sure, like, it obviously can be learned a bit, but I also think like understanding how to communicate it, learning how to communicate it matters. Because I think, when I first came out of school, which many of us do, like, we know what's, but we don't know how's, right? And I didn't understand how to do that. And, so that's been an area, frankly, for myself of that I've had to consciously work on from a development perspective. The biggest thing I've learned in that aspect of things is how to share, right? And to share to make sure people view you as a leader in your sharing, and come from it, that sharing with the position of strength. So simple things like, yeah, I messed this up, right? Like when I first developed our international business, I chased money, right? And that was, I made a mistake. The first partner fell apart in a terrible way. And this is what I learned from it. And this is what I do. This is how we approach it now, right? Like, I messed that up, right? But now we've learned it, we're moving forward. Or, I'm the only person on the executive team that, we're in a household with 2 working parents and young children. So I'm a big believer of people shouldn't talk about problems unless they have ideas for solutions. So usually what I do is I go, hey, I'll blast it out on like our Slack channels and our company Slack channels. Like, I've been really struggling. Like, for example, during COVID, like, we had a home pod where we were alternating watching the kids for school. Like, this is what we're doing. Like, my wife gets up earlier and she takes the first and she works, and then I take the next couple hours. Then and I've blocked my calendar accordingly. So during these hours, if you're trying to get to me, this is the reason you can't get to me. Just wanted to share it in case that can help anybody else, right? Like, or if you have other ideas that I can, make my life better, please share them, right? So I think that's a big thing, is like how to share some of the challenges you deal with both on a professional and a personal level, and also sharing ideas on how you're overcoming them.
Yeah, those are really good tip, and I think it dovetails nicely and also speaks to what Sean was saying about just like the nature of maybe like most industries, but especially in athletics, the level of luck and unpredictability and so on. And even in that, like in that moment, right, you're kind of like setting expectations and like clarifying for people like what they can like expect and not expect, from you.
And again, like Chicago taught us how to learn a lot. I don't know if it taught me fully how to work with people, right? And like in that aspect, that social kind of interaction, I think we all struggled with before we got to Chicago, and weren't always great at afterwards, and I still struggle with it.
So for yourself, Arjun.
Relatable. Relatable.
Right. The vast majority is sad. Not all.
No, I'm still very I'm playing with you, but yeah. What you were saying about the communication piece, I think we know how to process, but it's like, how do you articulate it in a way that shows that you get it, you understand, etc. But yeah, teasing you, friend.
Yes, but we're all friends here. And so I do want to turn to a fun one that all of our fellow Maroons can participate in too. I'm launching a poll right now. What are your least favorite sports metaphors in the workplace? So I've covered at least a few sports here. We got the basketball metaphors: balls in their court, slam dunk, and full court press. Arjun, this one's for you: above par, below par, par for the course, down to the wire, under the wire, in your wheelhouse, bush league, Hail Mary, tackle, drop the ball. What are your least favorite sports metaphors in the workplace? And fun. Trying to think them through. Here we go. Yeah, we got some results coming in, and then we'll make the rounds here from you. Which one is your least favorite, and why? Or which ones are your least favorite?
There are so many, aren't there?
There are so many. I know.
So many.
And there are only so many options that you can choose in a multiple choice poll. So I just thought of like the first 10 that irritate me too.
Should we say what our least favorite ones are now?
Yeah. I wanted to give people a chance to submit, so that you don't color their response. All right.
That's fair. I'm actually trying to take metaphors out of my language because I usually mess them up, but the sports ones I think I get right. I just try to avoid them.
Well, it's funny because sometimes they can act as like a shorthand and perhaps like lend a familiarity, but then also like to what extent do they become cliche or trite, or inaccurate, or and actually obfuscate meaning rather than clarify. So yeah, that's why I don't know the way that the metaphors work. All right, we're gonna end our poll. All right, I'm gonna share results here. Let's see. Here are our top ones. Pretty fair, instant distribution. Sometimes I'm more surprised by those that are not the least favorites and those that are. But okay, let's make our way around this virtual round table.
Around the horn, as they say.
Around the horn. That's another. Around the horn. Okay, yeah, let's go around the horn. Sarah, which ones are your least favorite sports metaphors in the workplace? Or if you're feeling forthright, which ones do you admit that you overuse, friend?
You know what? Like I said, I'm trying to eliminate. I would say My least favorite, it was a very visceral reaction, was in your wheelhouse. It's my least favorite because I don't know what it means. Where did the wheelhouse come from? What sport are we talking about? Maybe it's obvious and I'm just coolest. So yeah, that's what, and then the Bush League is my second one. Yeah, I don't know. Does anybody know the origins of the wheelhouse?
Well, Sean, she's coming for baseball metaphors. That's 2 for 2.
I don't even know that I knew that In Your Wheelhouse had baseball origins, but Bush League, I definitely do. Yeah, I knew that. I'll go. So I'm not super metaphorical, and I'm also not somewhat like, I try to avoid cliches as much as possible. And then Josh, you put up this list, and I realize I probably say half of these at least once a week. I'm probably going to cut a different way on this question because I couldn't pick one that didn't resonate with me at all, except that drop the ball. I hate that because it usually means something bad happened. And that's something that you like sports excellence. Yeah, so that would be my reason for that.
All right. That's a good answer. Drop the ball because of the reason or the circumstances under which you would say it. Okay, that's a good one. And right, if I don't mistake, the wheelhouse is like in baseball, or I guess softball too, like the prime spot within that strike zone where like a batter is like most likely to hit a home run or something like that's like your wheelhouse, you're like the range of motion that will best.
Thanks, Josh.
Yeah.
I still won't ever use it, but
But there you go. But now you know what you're not using. But yeah,
Clean it up for someone, setting it up. Yeah.
exactly. So it's in your wheelhouse. If it's something that you can knock out of the park.
there's some obvious ones. And I'm wondering if Samira's going to bring up one. So that one racing one came to mind.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, crossing the finish line, or I was trying to think what else.
No, definitely. And
Passing the baton.
Passing the baton, that's a good one. I would say that I'm going to start with one that I probably overuse, which is probably the balls in their court, right? And this comes up in a lot in kind of negotiations of like, okay, we've done our part, the ball's in their court, we're going to wait for them to come back, right? The one that I think like least is probably Hail Mary, because I'm a very like systems oriented kind of person. And so like a Hail Mary like implies that there's a lot of luck, right? and not a system. And so I don't really like relying on that. So that would makes me uncomfortable in the workplace when you hear about like we need a Hail Mary. That's not a good situation to you're in. No.
I like that's a very similar approach to Sean. It's not the metaphor itself, but the occasion on which you would use it.
Right. Right.
Interesting. I like that. Arjun,
Sorry,
go ahead.
Marathon. It's a marathon, not a sprint. That's the one I hear a lot.
Yeah, a sprint.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Sprint, passing the baton. Now they're all coming.
Marathon can be pretty quick.
Yeah,
though.
people say like on the Hail Mary, like a double bank shot often too. Or triple even if they want to go extreme. I don't usually use many sports metaphors. I use kind of some other ridiculous ones, and they're they'll be random. I use too many buffers, and I definitely need to get rid of those. So like those are just unnecessary, right? Completely. The ones I didn't like were Bush League and balls in their court, because this being a leadership panel, right? I feel like Bush League is being derogatory to someone else, and a leader needs to lead with kind of a sword, not a shield kind of thing, right? And the balls in their court, like it's always in your court. Like just go get it. Like if you want it, right? So I think from the theme of the panel, I would say those would be my least two favorite.
Yeah, absolutely right. Bush League, that one has to do with like, I mean, like rural like makeshift baseball diamonds, right? There's a bush league, something like that. Yeah, something like that. Don't quote me on it.
I
But
just
think
Googled,
that's-
I just Googled it real quick. Google Dictionary says minor league professional. Oh, not of the highest quality or sophistication, second rate, but it could
Right.
imply, you know, less
Right,
resources.
but I think
Well,
like
the
what
irony
does
was when
is,
like the
if
second
they-
league in NASCAR was called Bush League too, right? Like
Huh.
remember, like, but the beer, but yeah.
Right, that's the Anheuser-Busch.
Right. No, but it was the second.
Second.
It was below this. It was the second tier. Right?
Oh, so there you go.
Interesting. I just put that connection, which is like, why would you do that as a sponsor? But that's another conversation.
Right. There you go. That's why you need that consultancy aspect right there. Those were some really good answers, especially in the context of leadership skills. I'll open this up to our attendees. If you want to raise your hand, I'll let you weigh in on this question. We seem to have actually Hail Mary did not irritate our attendees as much as our panelists, but definitely Slam Dunk was one that seemed to be the least favorite among these among our attendees. Go ahead, feel free to weigh in, all of our longtime listener, first time callers. Peggy, I see your hand is up. I'll allow you. Go ahead, Peggy.
I don't see anybody except the panel. Is that correct?
Yes.
Oh, okay. All right. No, you're going to hate me for this because I loved all of you and I was a big sports person myself, but I hate anything in any conversation when somebody says, step up to the plate. Or-
Step up to the plates.
And particularly because it's a very male thing. And so what I wanted to do was, let's jour jeté or whatever the ballet, tour jeté over to the opinion side or something so incredible. And all the men wouldn't know what I was talking about. If you
Oh, okay.
Educate them, Peggy. Educate them.
There were no women in the room. When these words started, there were no women doing what all of you people are doing now. Or, you know, saute voce, or, I mean, you know, I'm an art person, so go with.
Well, yeah, let me, Peggy, that's also a great way also to think about these, like kind of, I guess, historically or contextually when like they really emerged to prominence, and perhaps absolutely as like a gendered way to like run the workplace and so on.
I love how
Which
this is
Sarah is like why you may have not felt good about in your wheelhouse, right? It's because it's like, oh, because you're X, this should be in your wheelhouse.
In your
right?
wheelhouse,
Like,
you should be able, to step up to the plate as it comes into your wheelhouse and you knock it out of the park. I'm with you, Peggy, because you know what, I was more in the arts dance scene on campus myself, in particularly, you know, in the tap dance arena and so on. So I'm with you. We should definitely, you know, jeté, and all that. Thank you. Let's see. Anyone else want to weigh in on this conversation? Thank you so much. You'll think
Thanks,
about
everybody. You.
Oh, sorry.
Thanks, Peggy.
Sorry, Peggy. Thank you so much. Let's I'll open up the floor. Oh,
Natalie has something.
Yeah, come on, Natalie. You're on the air, long time listener, first.
Yeah. Thank you for joining us. I think one of the ones that I've been thinking about is moving the goalposts. Like
Moving
that's
the
one that
goalposts.
I have a hard time with. I think Josh knows this because he's also a fellow Ohio State grad, but I have a lot of memories being on the field after a game, and people would be protecting us from ripping the goalposts down after a big win. So to me, it just brings back, it doesn't bring back any sort of business context. It brings back like having to to be in a whole crowd of people like fighting to get off the field. So moving the goalposts, I'm not.
And you literally cannot move a goalpost, can you? Well, no,
we tried really hard. Yeah, we tried really hard as students, but they didn't let us. So.
Natalie bringing the chaos. Okay.
she brings the chaos. I was at Ohio State as a grad student, so I did not get go down on the field to try to move those goalposts. But that's interesting, right? It's again like the context. That is like, this is not a business term. Excellent. That's another great one. Yeah, thank you so much, Natalie. Hey, Volker, great to see you again.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so good morning, everybody. This is Volker from the Bay Area. My accent is German, so don't be intimidated, please, by it. What I find funny, actually, I don't have much of a funny comment, because I should admit some of those terms I didn't really understand. I wasn't really sure how they're used or how they're meant in what context. But when it comes to the topic of this session, I used to be a national team member of Germany in gymnastics a long time ago, and later became a springboard diver and actually competed at World Masters Games. And sport transfer to my professional career, I was able to deal with setbacks. Like there's a lot of phases in sport where you really go through a lot of like real, not depressive, but really lows. But then you work yourself out, and I personally call it the valley of tears in my life. But you work yourself back into track, and that was a very, very helpful lesson I could transfer to my leadership in my professional career. So sorry, it wasn't a fun comment, but
no,
that's some experience I would like to mention on it.
I really appreciate that. Yeah. So how have you translated that, say, into your leadership practice?
Well, one is keep persistent and endurance. Like let's say I was in my teenage years, I moved out from home with 15 to the National Training Center, and you're all by your own. So sometimes you have lows in your workouts, in your day-to-day, but also it transfers to other fields. So I experienced this thing that like either everything was doing very well, like school performance and sport performance and everything else in my life, or I was in a low and nothing worked. So when it rains, it pours, those kind of things. And in those phases, and even later, you need, I trained myself some discipline, and you need to get some persistence in going through those phases and hope and work towards the next really high goal that you have in the back of your mind.
That's amazing. Volker, where did you go to Chicago for? What was your...
Actually business school, I should admit. So most people are smarter than I am, but I try to contribute as much as I can. And I'm currently actually the co-president of the Bay Area Alumni Club here.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Did you say, oh, sorry, I was gonna say, are you still involved with the sports that you
with gymnastics? Actually, to be honest, I work out if I can at Stanford or at a private gym, and I go, if I can, 3 times early morning and do my stuff to get it out of the way for my professional day. But I do a mix of things. I go running and swimming, whatever I have time and fits in my schedule. But gymnastics, I should say, is still the core of my attempts, at least, to fight aging and trying to keep in shape as good as I can. That I do. And I also, for a while, I mentored. Like there were some college gymnasts at Stanford, which I tried to mentor when they came with questions professionally. So I tried to help them in that way as well.
Super cool. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Absolutely, Volker. I'll also open the floor. If you want to weigh in on this, you're welcome to, but also general questions for our fantastic panelists. Here, see, Peggy, you have your hand.
No.
That's from before.
Oh, that's from before. Okay, no worries. Any other the questions, comments for our panelists? So yeah, this
Can I,
was.
can I show off my medal since it's
Please
right
do,
here?
please do. Yes, let's see your medal.
Just so if people want to do it next year, I've got my husband has one too. Look how nice this is. This was doing the 2021 5K. Yes, Samira's like, yes. It's a really good program.
Yeah.
It's a really it's really well done. And yeah, it's just really well done. Each year has a prize. I got some other stuff, but I won't bore you with those. But isn't that cool? It's like it's a legit 5K, people.
Yeah, it is a legit 5K, and what running is oh, hold on, it is definitely a nice medal. We do have excellent swag here at UChicago Alumni, so the more you get involved, the more you get. I want to thank our dream team of panelists for this Chicago style courtside.
Josh, it looks like there's a question in the.
Oh, is there a question? Oh, I'm sorry. Good, thank you. Good call outs.
You see,
Yeah, we have all right, so we have one that came in through the chat here. How do you balance being a sports fan and working on the administrative side? How, perhaps do you keep your emotions or passions out of the day-to-day? Or how do you either keep them out, or how do you channel them?
Probably a prerequisite for doing the job and working in sports is figuring out how to channel it in the most productive way possible. I do think when you win, when you have success, inevitably, like, the emotions really tie together, and there is a point where you just get to kind of like celebrate that and feel it on a probably even a different level than you would if you were I don't know, it's just a different connection, but it is something that's really important. I mean, there's obviously professional aspects to it that you have to balance. There's also the fact that, for better or worse, some amount of detachment can be necessary, because there's a lot of highs and lows, to Volker's point,
Right.
that can happen. So I think it's just a balancing act. It's probably a little bit individual how everyone does it, or if they can do it. There are people who have worked in sports who fall out of sports because it actually took them away from what they loved about sports. Yeah, Sarah is actually, that reminds me. Yeah, you have talked about that yourself.
Yeah. I know we're over time, so I'll be really quick. Yeah. So I worked at Major League Baseball, and so it was we talked about leadership and culture, and so it was not a good fit for me. So I actually didn't watch baseball for 10 years until the Cubs got into the World Series run, and I started watching baseball again. And then growing up,
we're really unpacking this whole thing with you and baseball. I feel like I know you better now, Sarah.
We are. And then, but growing up a Cubs fan, they lost so much that I don't care. Of course, I want my team, the Carolina Courage, to win. But if they don't, I'm not upset about it. I'd much rather have good leadership, a great fan experience, than a championship every year. Although I would love a championship. Well, sure. I'm now part of the. So that's my approach to it.
Right, but at what cost, right? So, yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the question always is like, why are you in it, right? Are you in it because you're a fan of some team, or a fan of a sport, or are you in it for other reasons? Like, I frankly grew up in Massachusetts, but I've never been the most avid sports fan. I'm definitely not an athlete like some of my colleagues, right? But I've always been excited to just be in a place where people spend their discretionary time and resources and love, right? And that's what always excited me. So I never had to separate it, because I'm always in that place of kind of culture connection, right? But yeah, I imagine for others, right? If you're like, I just care about my team winning and losing, that's really tough to live through.
Yeah, absolutely.
I would just pick up on Volker's comment earlier about how sports is actually a great background for leadership, because it does teach you how to deal with setbacks. And so I think that part of what we do is we deal with the ups and downs. And on the kind of operational side, like it is helpful to be able to just kind of have that as just background, and you do what you do, regardless of which way things go.
Yeah, that is an excellent point. Well put. Thank you again, for joining us this afternoon. I want to thank everyone for tuning in, especially those staying past the end of class. Gold stars all around. And we hope you'll continue your career development and community engagement with UChicago alumni. When this session closes, you'll have the opportunity not just to share your experience today, but also raise your hand to come off the bench and maybe help provide career programs for UChicago alumni. Career Month continues next week with emphasis on the aerospace industry and the social impact sector, plus a portfolio review for creative professionals. I dropped a link in the chat to our Career Month lineup. And then also, I recommend subscribe to the UChicago Alumni Career Programs newsletter for more information about events, resources, and more. It goes out twice a month, 0 spam. So have a marvelous weekend, Maroons, and we'll see you out there.
Thank you all.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Maroons, see y'all.